The Sligo wind howls at the door, like a hunter I have known before. Fergus the king sits in the shade, with his ghostly scabbarded blade. And Emmer says the world's forgot to dream, so I write their names down by the fire's gleam. Oh, write it down, keep the stories told, a link between the new world and the old. As long as we talk here by the fire, their voices rise ever higher and higher. Awive of the Tuatha De Danann. At the stones of ages Brian sware an oath, his hand in hers, a love for them both. But mortal hearts forget so fast, he chose the gold that wouldn't last. He broke his word at Clontarf shore, and left his lonely love to soar. Now Awive weeps by the ancient stone, for a mortal's promise overthrown. Her sorrow echoes a gentle sigh, beneath the cold and endless sky.
By Sleethwood shore a whisper calls, beyond the ferns where the twilight falls. Liam loved the quiet places, he traded warm for starlit spaces. Come away, human child, to the waters and the wild. Our world is full of laughter, with no sad hereafter. Come away, human child, come away, human child.
By the bridge that ancient hands did make, he saw a light that did not smoke. They were playing cards of stars and moons to haunting otherworldly tunes. He saw his Bridget pale and drawn in a gown of mist before the dawn. She belongs to the host now, a voice so cold, her heart forgotten, her story sold. A changeling left a winter stone. A winter stone. My sailors turn for home, but Forgale steers for the grey unknown. My spirit calls for my spectral queen, to a love more true than this mortal scene. O Dectera, my heart is yours, beyond the shores where the salt wind roars. Together now to the kingdom of the dead, by the ancient promise our souls have wed. Oh, listen to a tale of ancient pain, of Bailey and Island together again. A stranger's lie their mortal hearts did break, and stole them from the shore by the sea lake. But from their graves the two trees grew, a love eternal, strong and true. The yew and apple fused as one, a love that finally had begun.
Well, okay then. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. Good to see you here. You've been out exploring and running around the grid, having a great time, I hope so. Me too. So we have a nice Irish glen, the Keilora Glen, here at Shawnee Library in Second Life. And lots of megalithic monuments. And a fire. Woohoo! Stories around the fire. St. Patrick's Day and stories around the fire. What could even be better than that? Well, maybe if I turn on the picture so our YouTube friends could see it, that would be an improvement. There we go. Okay then. Tonight, our humble offerings are brand new original stories inspired by W.B. Yeats. This is Yeats from The Page to the Peat-Fire, Yeats Unwrapped, where poetry remembers that it was once a story. Step out of the printed page and into the flicker of story, where poems become voices and voices become living things once more. In this brief fireside session, a handful of Yeats' most haunting works are retold as tales of broken promises, stolen children, wandering souls, and loves that refuse the grave. The veil between the worlds grows thin, as it always does in Yeats, and what was once written becomes spoken and heard. Tonight, no stage, no spectacle, just a voice, a fire, and the old stories finding their way home. If you've ever found Yeats a little distant on the page, this might be the night he feels close enough to actually hear. Each story today will be followed by a short musical composition inspired by the tale. So listen for that, and we'll get started in just a moment. They say that W.B. Yeats wrote for the gods, but tonight we're bringing him back to the fire where the rest of us sit. And when you sit long enough by a fire like this, the stories don't come in any particular order. They come in the way the sparks do, one at a time and never quite where you expected. We start off with "To Some I Have Talked With by the Fire." The hearth in the old stone house didn't just provide warmth. It provided a rhythm. Outside, the Sligo wind toward the heather. But inside, the peat fire pulsed like a slow glowing heart. Ansel sat in the high back chair, the same one his father and grandfather used to watch the shadows dance. He wasn't alone, though a stranger looking through the window would have seen only a solitary old man and a half-empty glass of whiskey. "You're quiet tonight, Fergus," Ansel murmured, his eyes fixed on a corner where the firelight failed to reach. From the gloom, a soft metallic rasp answered, the sound of a scabbard brushing against a ghost's thigh. Fergus didn't manifest as a mist or a cliche. He was a sudden density in the air, a shadow with the sharp profile of a king from a forgotten age. "My, the wind has a cry of a hunt in it," Fergus said, his voice like dry leaves skittering over stone. "It makes the old blood restless." They were companions. They were the companions Yeats had whispered about. The ones who didn't care for the price of cattle or the local gossip in the village. Ansel had spent his youth trying to outrun them, seeking the loud, bright distractions of the city. But the city was thin, it had no roots. He had returned to the fire because only here, in the company of the noble and the dead, did the world feel solid. A third chair, tucked near the bookshelf, creaked. "He's right," said a woman's voice. This was Emma, not the queen of legend, perhaps, but a woman who had walked these hills 500 years ago with a heart just as fierce. She stepped into the amber light, her hair a wild spill of silver and raven black. "There's shifts coming. The unquiet ones are gathering at the gate." Ansel took a sip of his whiskey, feeling the burn settle in his chest. "Why, well, let them gather. We've kept the fire for them after all, haven't we?" "It's more than that tonight," Emma said, leaning forward. Her eyes were like salt water. "The world outside is forgetting how to dream, John. When they stop dreaming, the paths between our world and yours begin to carry us over. Soon, even your hearth won't be enough to call us back." The room grew colder. The clashing of swords Yeats wrote of wasn't always a physical battle. Often it was the friction between the eternal and the mundane. Ansel looked at his guests, the warrior and the weaver of shadows. They were his secret aristocracy, the ones who had taught him that a life spent pondering the god-fired mysteries was worth more than a century of common toil. "Well, what would you have me do?" Ansel asked. "I am one man with a dying fire." Fergus stood, his stature seemingly growing until his head nearly brushed the blackened rafters. "Write it down," the shadow commanded. The stories are the anchors. As long as the words are spoken, the path stays open. Talk to us, John Ansel. Tell the world we are still sitting by the fire, waiting for someone to be brave enough to look into the dark. Ansel reached for a pen, put the tattered notebook on the side of the table. His hand shook, not from age, but from the sudden weight of the task. Outside, the storm shrieked, 1,000 desolate voices demanding to be heard. He began to write, his pen scratching a frantic rhythm against the silence. He wrote of the kings in exile, of the ladies who died for love and woke up as birds, of the quiet and holy madness of sitting in a room filled with people no one else could see. As the sun began to gray the edges of the curtains hours later, the chairs were empty. The peat had turned to white ash, but on the table lay a stack of pages still warm to the touch. Ansel leaned back, exhausted and exhilarated. He had talked with the spirits, and for once the spirits had talked back. He closed his eyes, hearing the faint, fading echo of a sword being sheathed. The fire was out, but the light on the page was just beginning to burn.
The Sligo wind howls at the door like a hunter I have known before. Fergus the king sits in the shade with his ghostly scabbarded blade. And Emmer says the world's forgot to dream, so I write their names down by the fire's gleam. Oh, write it down, keep the stories told, a link between the new world and the old. As long as we talk here by the fire, their voices rise ever higher and higher.
Oh, they speak of many things, those who linger by the fire. But more often than not, they speak of the old bargains, the kind made when the world was younger and far less forgiving. Aye, there's a place not far from here. You know, the big flat rock up on the ridge? The one the sheep won't graze near even when the grass is lush? Aye, that's the grey rock. It wasn't always just stone. Aye, a long time ago, when the Tuatha Danann, the old tall ones, were fading into the hills, they held a final feast on top of that rock. They weren't eating bread and butter. They're drinking the wine of the gods, the kind that makes a man feel like he can catch a falling star in his palm. Now, there was a woman there named Aoife. She wasn't of our world, but she loved a man who was. His name was Brian. He was a hero, a fighter, the kind of man who looked good in the sunlight but struggled when the shadows got long. You know the kind. Greetings, Geoffrey. Aoife brought him to the grey rock. She gave him a gift, a pin for his cloak, made of silver that never tarnished. As long as you wear this, she whispered, no blade will touch you. You will be a king among men, but you must promise me one thing. Never fight for a cause that isn't your own. Keep your heart here with the quiet things. Brian took the pin. He took the protection, and for a while he was the greatest warrior Ireland had ever seen. He walked through battles like he was walking through a summer rain, the swords just sliding off him. Aye, but men are fickle things. A king from the south offered Brian gold and fame to fight a war that had nothing to do with honor and everything to do with creed. Brian looked at the silver pin, then he looked at the gold, and he chose the gold. He marched to the Battle of Clontarf. He fought like a demon, but halfway through the slaughter he felt a cold wind. He looked down, and the silver pin was just a grey, melted smear on his tartan. It hadn't melted, it hadn't fallen away, it had melted away. Without the magic, the first spear that found him went straight through him. Back at the grey rock, Aoife sat waiting. She didn't cry. The gods don't cry like we do, you know. They just turn cold. She watched her people leave, slipping into the mounds, but she stayed on that rock for 200 years, waiting for a man who had traded eternity for a moment of fame. When you pass that rock now, and you hear the wind whistling through the cracks, that's not the wind. That's Aoife, still calling out to a ghost, asking why the gold was heavier than her love.
Awive of the tuatha de danan. At the stones of ages Brian sware an oath, his hand in hers, a love for them both. But mortal hearts forget so fast, he chose the gold that wouldn't last. He broke his word at Clontarf shore, and left his lonely love to soar. Now Awive weeps by the ancient stone, for a mortal's promise overthrown. Her sorrow echoes a gentle sigh, beneath the cold and endless sky.
Now, some promises are broken with sword in hand. Some are broken with a single step in the wrong direction, and sometimes it's not a promise at all that's lost, but a child. This is the tale of the Ross's boy. No, I know you've seen the lake water lapping at the reeds near Sleuth Wood, haven't you? It looks peaceful. But the old folk don't go there after the sun dips behind the mountain. They know about the ones who live in the leafy island. There was a boy once, let's call him Liam, who lived in a house full of noise. There were 5 brothers, a crying baby, and a father who always had a chore for bare vital hands. Liam loved them, but his head was full of the quiet places. One evening, Liam wandered too far. He found a spot where the ferns grew taller than a man's waist. And there they were. Oh, they didn't look like monsters. They looked like starlight caught in a human shape. They were dancing on the shore, their feet not even bending the grass. One of them, a girl with eyes the color of a deep well, held out her hand. "Come away, human child," she sang, and her voice made the sound of his mother's kitchen seem like a clanging iron forge. "To the waters and the wild, the world you live in is full of weeping. It's full of taxes and broken hearts and heavy boots. With us you'll feast on vats of stolen cherries. You'll chase the moon till it tires." Liam looked back toward the smoke rising from his own chimney. He thought of the cold winters and the way his hands would eventually grow calloused and tired. Then he looked at the fairies, who would never grow old, who would never feel the bite of a frost. He took her hand. The moment his fingers touched hers, the world went silent. He felt himself being pulled into the deep green of the woods. He saw that the ferns that dropped tears and the slumbering trout they teased in the stream. That was beautiful. It was perfect. But here's the thing about the stolen. A year in that world is a lifetime in ours. One night, Liam looked through a gap in the hills and he saw his old house. It was quiet now. The kettle on the hob was singing, just as the poem says. He saw his brothers grown into men, sitting by a fire that looked much warmer than the pale moon fire of the Shee. He heard the lowing of the cattle in the distance, a heavy, earthly sound. He tried to run back, but his feet wouldn't touch the ground. He had solemn eyes now. He was no longer a boy of the earth. He was a ghost among the living. He realized then that while the world is full of weeping, it's also full of warmth. So if you're out near the lake and you hear a laugh that sounds a bit too much like a bird's cry, oh, my friend, don't follow it. Stay by your fire. The cherries are sweet in the woods, yes, but nothing tastes as good as a piece of bread toasted by a hearth that you call home.
By Sleuthwood shore a whisper calls, beyond the ferns where the twilight falls. Liam loved the quiet places, he traded warm for starlit spaces. Come away, human child, to the waters and the wild. Our world is full of laughter, with no sad hereafter. Come away, human child, come away, human child.
The fair folk will take you with a song, if you're willing. But there are others. There are others who don't ask at all. This is the Shee's card game. There's a spot where the river curls like a silver snake, and the old bridge, the one they say was built in a single night, still stands. That's where O'Driscoll lived. He had a young bride, Bridget, with hair the color of ripe wheat and a laugh that could wake the spring. One evening, O'Driscoll was walking home. The air went strangely still, the kind of silence that feels heavy like wool over your ears. He saw a light through the trees, a fire that didn't smoke. He followed it, thinking it was a neighbor. But when he stepped into the clearing, he saw them. Men and women in cloaks of silk, their faces pale as bone, sitting around a table of polished stone. And they were playing cards. "Aye, sit then," one said, his voice like a blade being drawn from a sheath. "Play a hand for your luck, O'Driscoll. For your luck." Oh, he should have run. He knew the stories, but the cards were painted with stars and moons, and he felt a pull in his chest he couldn't fight. He sat. He played. As he dealt the deck, he looked across the fire. There, standing behind the tall, pale king of the company, was his lovely wife, Bridget. She wasn't tied up. She wasn't crying. She was just still. Her eyes were wide and vacant, staring at nothing. She was dressed in a gown of gray mist, and she was pouring wine into a silver cup for the things that weren't human. O'Driscoll's heart nearly burst. "Bridget!" he cried out. The players didn't look up. One of them, a woman with fingers like bird claws, reached out and touched O'Driscoll's hand. "Eh? She belongs to the host now." "Yes, she belongs to the host. She took the bread. She drank the wine. She's forgotten the smell of the peat-fire and the sound of your name, O'Driscoll." O'Driscoll grabbed for his wife, but his hands passed right through her, as if she were made of smoke. The host began to laugh, a high, thin sound like breaking glass. They rose up, and the fire turned into a whirlwind of dead leaves. "Come away! Come away!" they all shrieked, and they ascended into the air, a cloud of birds that were actually souls. O'Driscoll woke up the next morning at the edge of the river. He ran home, praying it was a dream. He burst through his door, and there was his mother weeping over a cold bed. His Bridget was there, lying on the sheets. Her body was perfect, not a mark on her. But when O'Driscoll touched her cheek, it was like touching a winter stone. The life was gone. The host had taken the real Bridget, the spark, the soul, the laugh, and left behind a changeling of clay and silence. So, if you're ever out by the old bridge and you hear the sound of cards being shuffled in the wind, don't stop. Keep your eyes on the road, because the host of the air is always looking for a fifth player, and the stakes are higher than any man can afford to lose.
By the bridge that ancient hands did make, he saw a light that did not smoke. They were playing cards of stars and moons to haunting otherworldly tunes. He saw his Bridget pale and drawn in a gown of mist before the dawn. She belongs to the host now, a voice so cold, her heart forgotten, her story sold. A changeling left a winter stone. A winter stone.
Yes, some men lose what they love and spend the rest of their lives grieving. And some go looking for something the world was never meant to give. The Ghost Ship of the North. Inspired by Yeats' poem, The Shadowy Waters. There was a man once, Forgale, who didn't want a wife of flesh and blood. He didn't want the short-lived love of the village, the kind that ends in a quiet grave to a grieving widow. He wanted a love that was written in the stars, a love that had no beginning and no end. He followed a dream. He took his ship, a black hulled thing with sails like wings of a moth, out into the grey misty waste of the North Sea. His sailors were terrified. They said the water there didn't splash, it whispered. And then out of the fog came another ship. It moved without the wind. It was silent, save for the sound of a harp that seemed to be played by the air itself. On that ship was a queen, Dectera. She was beautiful, but her eyes were the color of the deep Atlantic, and she looked like a woman who had been walking in her sleep for 1,000 years. Forgale stepped onto the deck. He played his own harp, a magic thing made of whalebone and the hair of a dead goddess. And as he played, the world around them began to dissolve. The sea turned into a field of white lilies. The stars came down to rest on the masts. "Who are you?" Dectra asked. Her voice sounded like it came from the bottom of a well. "I'm the man who's been looking for you since the world was made of clay," Forgale said. But here's the haunting part. Neither of them were alive anymore. Not really. To find that perfect love, Forgale had led them both to the land of the ever-living, which is just another name for the beautiful, glittering kingdom of the dead. His sailors looked on in horror as the two ships drifted further into the mist. They saw Forgale and Dectra standing at the prow, their shadows merging into one. They weren't breathing, but they were smiling. The sailors turned their own ship around and rowed for their lives, back to the world of hearth fires and dirty ditches and growing old. Now, they say, on the coldest nights, when the fog is so thick you can't see your own hand, you might hear a harp playing far out at sea. It's a lovely sound, the loveliest you'll ever hear. But friend, don't listen too closely. If you do, you'll start to find the world of the living a bit too loud, a bit too bright, and you'll find yourself wandering toward the water, looking for a ghost ship that will never bring you home.
My sailors turn for home, but Forgale steers for the grey unknown. My spirit calls for my spectral queen, to a love more true than this mortal scene. O Dectra, my heart is yours, beyond the shores where the salt wind roars. Together now to the kingdom of the dead, by the ancient promise our souls have wed. Oh, listen.
And then there are those who find love true and perfect. I lose it anyway. The two trees of Bailey and Eileen. Now, you've heard of lovers who died of a broken heart. But have you heard of the love that was murdered by a lie? Bailey was a prince of Ulster, as handsome as a summer morning and just as bright. Eileen was a princess of Leinster, with a heart that beat in time with his across the miles. They were to meet at the edge of the sea, at a place called the White Strand, to finally be together. But there are things in this world, and things not of this world, that hate a perfect love. A stranger appeared to Bailey as he raced south. He was a grey man with eyes like cold ashes. "Why do you hurry, Prince?" the stranger asked. "To meet my love," Bailey said, his horse lathered with sweat. The stranger shook his head. "Ah, then turn back, Bailey. Eileen is dead. The breath left her when she heard you had fallen in battle. They're digging her grave even now." Bailey didn't weep. He simply stopped. His heart shattered like dropped glass, and he fell dead on the sand right where he stood. The stranger then flew north. Yes, flew, for he was no man but a shadow of the air, and found Eileen. He told her the same lie. Bailey is gone. And just like that, her spirit fled to find him in the dark. The people found them, miles apart. They buried Bailey in the north and Eileen in the south. But nature has a memory that humans lack. From Bailey's grave a yew tree grew, dark and stubborn. From Eileen's grave an apple tree grew, sweet and white-blossomed. For 7 years they reached out, their roots pushing through the cold Irish earth, their branches straining against the wind. Eventually the poets of Ireland came. They cut a tablet of wood from the yew and a tablet from the apple. They carved the greatest love stories of the world upon them. When those two pieces of wood were brought into the High King's Hall at Tara, something happened that silenced the room. The two tablets jumped from the poet's hands. They didn't just touch, they fused together. The yew and the apple became one grain, one wood, one life. You couldn't pull them apart with a team of oxen. So when you see two trees in the wild with their branches tangled so tight you can't tell where one ends and the other begins, don't think of them as wood. Think of Bailey and Eileen. They found each other in sap and leaf because the world of the living was too small to hold them both.
Oh, listen to a tale of ancient pain, of Bailey and Eileen together again. A stranger's lie their mortal hearts did break, and stole them from the shore by the sea lake. But from their graves the two trees grew, a love eternal, strong and true. The yew and apple fused as one, a love that finally had begun.
And so, thank you for attending our stories this St. Patrick's Day. For those that might like to know a bit more about John Ansell, our keeper of tales tonight, listen on. These are all original stories created by, well, me, with help from a couple friends, inspired by W.B. Yeats' poetry. So, John Ansell, the keeper of the unquiet page. They say every house in Sligo has a shadow, but Ansell's house was built of them. He wasn't born to the name. In the old tongue, Ansell means God's helmet, a piece of divining armor that meant to protect the head from the things that eyes shouldn't see. He was a man who had walked the thin cities of the east, where the lights are so bright people forget they have souls. But the winds of the west kept calling John back, whispering through the cracks of his ambition until he traded his fine suits for a coat of heavy wool and a pen of cold silver. Ansell became a collector of the fading. He realized that when a story is no longer told, the spirit inside it begins to starve. The kings turn to dust, the lovers turn to salt, and the stolen children lose their way home forever. Ansell took up residence in the stone house on the ridge, the one where the hearth never truly goes out. They call it a famine cottage, walls of unmortared stone 3 feet thick, a turf roof leaning down over 2 small square windows like a sullen eyebrows. And he made a bargain with the wayward Twilight Company. I will give you a voice, he said, if you would give me the truth. Ansell is the witness. He sits in the high-back chair, his notebook open like an altar. He doesn't just write words, he anchors the ghost to the earth. When the wind shrieked desolate outside, Ansell didn't bolt the door. He pulled up an extra chair. He knew the only thing more dangerous than a ghost is a ghost that has been forgotten. He is the bridge. He is the one who sits between the weeping of the world and the laughter of the she. And tonight he has invited us to sit by his fire. He has unwrapped the poems and found the living marrow inside. In Ansell's house, the ink is still wet, the peat is still glowing, and the stories are finally finding their way home. So again, friends, in Kitely at the Storylink Radio Estate, thank you for being here. The Kailua Glen here in Second Life, thank you for being here at the Shawnee Library. And to our esteemed family and friends on YouTube, happy St. Patrick's Day all. Happy and blessed St. Patrick's Day to you. Good night.